Step into the velvet void of a story well told, where the shadows are deep and the truth is even deeper. We bring you the smooth, cinematic narratives that explore the quiet mysteries of the soul and the mind. Subscribe now and lose yourself in our world of shadows.
My grandmother turned 81 that spring, and my family threw her a party she never actually wanted. That's the thing nobody talks about. The way people plan celebrations for someone else and somehow make it entirely about themselves. My mom spent 3 weeks choosing the venue. My aunt drove 40 minutes each way to test cake samples. My uncle kept forwarding email threads about seating arrangements like it was a corporate merger. And my grandmother, the woman whose birthday it supposedly was, sat in her recliner in the corner of her living room and told me quietly one afternoon that she just wanted a pot of good coffee and someone to watch old movies with her. I was 27 that year, working nights at a physical therapy clinic, covering for colleagues on leave, eating lunch at 11 p.m., and calling it dinner. I didn't have money to spare, and I definitely didn't have vacation days, but I had requested that specific weekend off back in January, 6 months in advance, because I knew what my grandmother's birthday meant and I wasn't going to miss it. Her name was Roberta, but she'd gone by Bobbyson since before my mother was born. She was small and sharp-eyed, and she laughed at things most people didn't notice were funny. She had lived in the same house in Asheville for 34 years. She kept a garden in the backyard that she tended herself. Still, even with her knees the way they were, she made the best chicken and dumplings I have ever eaten in my life, and she always remembered what you told her. Even the small things, especially the small things. I was the only grandchild who called her every week. I'm not saying that to sound noble. I'm saying it because it matters to understanding what happened later. The party was set for a Saturday evening, a rented event space downtown, 60 people invited. A caterer my mother found on Instagram. I had driven down from Charlotte the night before. Pulled into my grandmother's driveway around midnight, let myself in with the key she'd given me years ago, and found her still awake in the kitchen with a cup of tea and a crossword puzzle. We sat up until almost 2 in the morning. She told me about the neighbor's dog that kept digging under her fence. She told me about a documentary she'd seen about Alaskan fishing boats and how she'd always wanted to see Alaska but never had. She asked me about my job, actually listened to the answer, asked follow-up questions. We talked about her garden, about an old friend of hers who'd recently passed, about a book she was halfway through. It was the kind of conversation that fills something up in you. The kind you don't realize you've been starving for until you're sitting in the middle of it. I slept well that night. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my mother. Change of plans. Aunt Viv and Uncle Paul invited us to the lake house for the long weekend. The party venue had a last-minute cancellation fee issue anyway. We're going to reschedule Grandma's birthday for next month. You should come to the lake house. We're leaving from here around noon. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. I walked downstairs. My grandmother was at the kitchen table, already dressed, her hair done, wearing the blue cardigan she saved for occasions. She had a small gift bag sitting by the door, something she'd wrapped for herself to open at the party because that's the kind of woman she was, the kind who made her own small ceremonies. She looked up at me when I came in. "Did you see the text?" I asked. She nodded once, looked back down at her coffee cup. "Your mother called me this morning." "Grandma, it's fine." She said it the way people say it when it is absolutely not fine, but they have decided, somewhere deep in themselves, that they are not going to let it break them. It's just a day. It wasn't just a day. It was her 81st birthday, and her children had canceled it the morning of to go to Lake House. I sat down across from her. "I'm not going to the lake house." She looked up. "I'm staying here," I said, "if that's okay with you." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've got eggs, and I think there's still some of that good coffee your boyfriend sent at Christmas." "Then we're set," I said. She smiled. It was a real one, the kind that reached her eyes and stayed there. My phone buzzed. My mother, "Don't be dramatic, sweetheart. It's just a reschedule." Then my aunt, "Come to the lake. It'll be so fun." Then my cousin, who was 22 and thought everything was content. The lake house has a hot tub, you have to come." I put my phone face down on the counter. We made breakfast together. Scrambled eggs and toast, and the good coffee, which we had in her good mugs, the ones she kept in the cabinet above the refrigerator and only brought out for company she actually liked. She told me about the summer she turned 20. How her own mother had made her a cake from scratch, and how they'd eaten it on the back porch during a thunderstorm. She laughed telling it. I laughed with her. After breakfast, she said she wanted to show me something. She took me to the back bedroom. Not her room, the one she used as a kind of study. There were shelves of books, a sewing machine she no longer used, boxes she'd been slowly working through since my grandfather passed 4 years ago, and in the corner, tucked behind a filing cabinet, a small fireproof safe. She didn't open it that day. She just put her hand on it and looked at it for a moment. "Your grandfather and I built something together," she said. "When we sold the shop, we were careful with what we got for it. We made good decisions, mostly." She paused. "I want to make sure that when the time comes, those decisions end up somewhere they'll mean something." I didn't ask what she meant exactly. It felt like something I was supposed to hear without interrogating. "Okay," I said. She nodded, like that was the right answer. We spent the rest of the day the way she'd wanted, old movies on her television. The ones she'd grown up watching, the kind with dialogue that crackles and women in heels on staircases. We ordered pizza. We ate it on the couch. She fell asleep during the second film, and I covered her with the throw blanket from the arm of the chair and sat there in the quiet of her house, and felt strangely, perfectly content. I stayed the whole weekend. Monday morning, my family came back from the lake house. My mother called me from the car. "You really missed a great time," she said. "I had a great time," I said. Silence. "You could have come. Grandma was fine. She's always fine." I didn't say what I was thinking. I said, "She seemed good. We had a nice weekend. Well, the reschedule is looking like the third weekend of next month. I'm going to need your help with the decorations, so keep that free." I said, "Okay." I drove back to Charlotte, back my night shifts and my sad desks, lunches, and my small apartment with the good light and the second-hand furniture I'd chosen myself. My boyfriend Chris was there when I got home. He asked how it went. I told him about the movies and the pizza and the conversation in the kitchen at midnight. I did not tell him about the text my mother had sent that morning, or my grandmother standing in the kitchen in her blue cardigan with the gift bag by the door. I told him later. Much later. He said, "Your family does this to her a lot, doesn't it?" It wasn't a question. The reschedule never happened. The third weekend of next month became "something came up," which became "let's just do it over Thanksgiving," which became a brief mention in a group chat that was immediately buried under memes and unrelated family gossip. My grandmother never brought it up. She never asked. She had spent 81 years learning which battles to quietly let go. We still talked every week. She asked me once about 6 months later if I would be willing to meet with someone on her behalf. A financial advisor, her words, though later I would understand he was more specifically her estate attorney. She asked me not to mention it to my mother or my aunt. I asked why. "Because it's mine," she said simply, "and I get to decide." I said, "Of course." I met him at his office on a Tuesday afternoon. He was a quiet, careful man in his 60s who spoke slowly and chose his words like someone who understood their weight. He told me my grandmother had been in contact with him for several years, that she had made arrangements and recently revised them, and that she wanted me to understand the general shape of what she had decided in case questions arose later that she might not be around to answer herself. I sat there with my hands in my lap. Her grandfather's hardware shop had sold in the late 90s. The number was not what I would have expected. Neither was what they had done with it in the years since. Cautious investments, a paid-off house, decades of compounding returns, no lavish spending, no dramatic gestures, just patience and care, and two people who had always known the difference between what you want and what you need. The estate, he told me, had been revised to reflect relationships, not obligation. I drove home and sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time. I called my grandmother that evening. She answered on the second ring. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay. Are you okay?" "I'm watching the news and eating leftover soup," she said. "So I'm fantastic." I laughed, and then, stupidly, I cried a little, not in a sad way, in the way you cry when something confirms something you already knew but hadn't said out loud. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "I know," she said. "That's why I did it." My grandmother passed away 14 months later. It was March, which felt wrong. She had always been a summer person. She went quietly, in her own house, the way she had wanted. I was there. My mother and my aunt arrived afterward, which is its own sentence with its own weight. There was a service. My family spoke at it. They talked about her cooking and her garden and her sharp sense of humor, and all of it was true, and none of it was enough. 3 weeks later, her attorney reached out to schedule a reading of the will. I remember my mother mentioning the lake house that morning. Something about wanting to list it. A question about whether to hire the same realtor they'd used before. The logistics of it all. She seemed to think the meeting was a formality, an administrative step before things got sorted the way she expected. We sat in his conference room, my mother and my aunt on one side of the table, me on the other, and a handful of more distant relatives gathered at the far end. My grandmother had left generous specific bequests to her children. The house, some furniture, amounts that were fair and considered. She had left smaller, meaningful things to cousins and old friends. A charitable bequest to a literacy organization she had donated to for 30 years. And then the residual estate, the bulk of it, the investments and the accounts and the contents of the fireproof safe, had been left in trust, with me as sole beneficiary. My mother made a sound I have no word for. My aunt looked at me like I had done something to her. I looked at the table. The attorney continued reading. He was professional about it. He noted that the document included a statement from my grandmother. She had written it herself, extended, explaining simply that she had made her decision based on demonstrated care and consistent presence over many years, and that she believed the assets would be used wisely. My mother turned to me. "Did you know about this?" "She told me she had made arrangements," I said. "I didn't know the specifics." "You must have said something to her, influenced her." I looked at her then, directly. "I called her every week," I said. "That's what I did." The room was very quiet. "I came to her birthday when everyone else went to the lake house," I said. "That's what I did." My aunt started to say something about fairness, about expectations, about the house and the years she'd put in. I listened to all of it. I let her finish. And then I said, "Grandma knew what she wanted to do with what she built. She spent her whole life being careful about it. I think we should respect that." The conversation that followed was difficult. Some of it was ugly. My mother called me that evening, and the call did not go well. She called again the next day. And the day after that, I answered twice. I let the rest go to voicemail. Chris took me out to dinner that Friday. Not anywhere fancy. Just the Italian place near our apartment where we always went when something had happened and we needed normal. We sat in a corner booth, and he ordered the thing I always ordered, and I ordered the thing he always ordered, and somewhere in the middle of the breadsticks I started talking about my grandmother, and couldn't stop. I told him about the crossword puzzles and the 2 a.m. conversations and the good mugs she kept above the refrigerator. I told him about the documentary on Alaskan fishing boats and how she'd always wanted to go. I told him about the chicken and dumplings. I told him I had no idea what I was going to do with a sum of money that felt like a responsibility more than anything else. What would she want you to do with it? He asked. I thought about that for a long time. Something careful, I said. And something that mattered. We went to Alaska that September, Chris and I, just us. I had never been. I stood on a dock at 6 in the morning, with cold air on my face and water the color of slate in every direction, and I thought about her sitting in her recliner, watching a documentary, quietly wanting she never asked anyone else to make happen for her. I made them happen. Some of them at least. The literacy organization she had donated to for 30 years received a significant additional gift that fall, given anonymously, with a note that said only in memory of Roberta, who always remembered the small things. My mother and I still talk. Less than we used to. She came around eventually, not fully, not without resentment she tries to keep below the surface, but enough. My aunt took longer. That's okay. The gift bag is still in my apartment. I brought it back from my grandmother's house the week after she passed. I never opened it. She'd never gotten to that part. I keep it on the shelf in my study, next to a photograph of her in the backyard with her garden behind her, squinting a little in the summer light, looking exactly like herself. Some people show up, some people don't. She knew the difference. She always had.